Hello and welcome to the Who the Fuck is in the Mirror podcast. I'm Angela Spooner, your host, emotional intelligence guide, trauma-informed coach, yoga instructor, confident, badass single mom of 3 amazing children, and founder of Unabashedly You. This podcast is all about using books, analogies, and metaphors to dive deep into who you really are to yourselves, not just as parents or some fictional version others made you out to be, right? But who the fuck you are. I want you to find your confidently badass, secure version of you that you lost along the way, or maybe you never even had in the first place because you were busy with everyone and everything else. Does that sound about right? So how about we get into the science of why we are a bunch of fucked up individuals who look in the mirror and don't even recognize the person that's staring back. Join me in the best journey you'll ever experience. Why, you may ask? Because it is the journey to transform your self-doubt, insecurity, and overall dysfunctional brain into self-aware, badass confidence and understanding. I hope you're as excited as I am because I cannot wait to get into this. Hey everybody, we're back here with Who the Fuck is in the Mirror. Today we're going to be going over chapter 2 of The Body Keeps the Score, Revolutions in Understanding Mind and Brain. With that, let's start with a quote from Simrad. The greatest sources of our suffering are the lies we tell ourselves. Okay, so how many times have we sat there and said something so many times we began to believe it? I remember my brain pre-self-aware. I would sit there, I'd say something so many times to as many people as I possibly could. Because in my mind, if I had enough people agree with me, then I'd finally tell myself it was okay. I needed that validation in order to feel like I was okay and I was accepted. Or how about when we lash at somebody, right? For the dumbest reasons. I remember when I would scream at my kids, which, if you've been there, you have. If you haven't, then cool. Well, some of my worst moments were when I was mentally in those moments, but I was unable to actually process those moments because I was too focused on all the things that my kids needed. I never had time to process. So I held it in, and then lashed out at my kids. But it was because of something completely opposite of what I was originally dysregulated by. If I don't understand, then I can't understand and fix it. Okay? If I don't understand, then I can't possibly understand and fix it. With that, let's start off with talking about Kolk, where he's at a schizophrenic facility, right? He begins explaining how the patients had all these traumatic experiences, but they'd talk about them in the late hours when the doctors weren't there. But the next morning, when the reports were made, there was such a dispassionate way that a patient's symptoms were discussed. They were so concerned with how to treat the issue than understanding why they were having their issues. Seriously, what was the cause? Why are they doing this? Let's talk about me for a second, right? One of my biggest issues I've had to face was that I was always trying to fix my problems, but I never took the time to understand why I had these problems. But isn't that what we all tend to do, though? We sit there and try to fix who we are and bury what is or is not acceptable. But if we can't then we'd sit there and we'd talk shit about anyone who doesn't accept our behaviors. Our ego loves to be pumped up. And what better way to push it all down than to simply say, fuck you, to what's really going on within ourselves? Well, if we read on, Kolk talks about how the good things they did or accomplishments that they achieved were never really even discussed. We're taught to follow rules and regulations, right? And we've forgotten to have a voice and speak. For instance, let's talk about my DCS case for a bit. So there was a very legitimate reason DCS had gotten involved, but for the purposes of my children's privacy, we're not going to go into the why. Basically, I was not involved, but my issue regarding it was that the DCS worker would not believe my words, would brush my concerns under the rug because my children were too afraid to verbalize. Because of this, the DCS worker began to treat me like the problem because she didn't understand. She would say I was being vindictive and just wanted to make my ex-husband out to be the bad guy. Even now, this is hard to talk about because the issue was not that I was lying, but that she didn't believe me. So this started making me feel like a crazy person. It wasn't that everyone believed what she said. It was that the people who quote unquote mattered, aka DCS, were saying I was the problem. For instance, we'll talk about something else, right? The abuse I had experienced with him was very continuous and sporadic. I never knew when or how he would react to situations. Sometimes he would be calm, cool, and collected, while other times he would throw me out of the house 8 months pregnant with no shoes on, and I'd get blisters. I can't tell you how many phones he broke. My point is that we never know the real story of situations. We'll never know unless we actually can try to understand. The problem is that oftentimes we become desensitized. So it's not that you're the problem or I'm the problem. It's that the person becomes desensitized to information and unempathetic and points the finger at the wrong person because they are tired. They're tired of their job. They're tired of situations at home. They don't even realize that they're triggered by certain things that you say. Then they don't even take into account the mental aspects, right? In that instant, it was couldn't understand how somebody could be so manipulative that he would be able to coax her into thinking that he was such an amazing person, right? So with that, I could easily say my ex and DCS worker were obviously the problem, right? Yeah, obviously. Fuck yes, I could say that. But I now can say, not back then, but now I can look at why they were the way they were and why they are the way they are. I can't speak for everybody from back then because it was years ago. Who knows how they are? But oftentimes, it's not about you. We take things so personally because of our own traumatic experiences that we're unable to look from a fresh lens and be able to actually understand the person's emotions and who is really telling the truth and what is being held back. And that is normally because we can't see clearly if we can't see clearly within ourselves. You see, the more we understand, the softer we can become with our hearts and truly be free of the trauma that so easily punishes our minds. If we're able to talk and be heard, that makes all the difference in the world. Being heard is the most essential component. We want to be heard, to be understood, and yet we don't receive that. So we lose sight of who the fuck we even are. So let's look at the women that signed up for the electroshock therapy, right? They signed up in order to forget the experiences that were so hard for them to deal with. So we see in the book, he talks about how they opened up so much that some weren't even sure about doing it anymore. When I read that, I wondered, why the change, right? Why did they go from wanting to forget to opening up so much right before the electroshock? So what I believe is that they felt comfortable about getting it off their chests because they knew they wouldn't remember the vulnerability of saying their quote unquote shameful experiences out loud. Fuck it, right? Kind of like when you get drunk and all of a sudden you could care less what your body looks like naked and can have sex with somebody fully confident because you don't have to feel the feelings associated with being vulnerable. It's like I'm saying that from personal experience. Okay, so moving on. What about the voices that we hear? Okay, on a different note, or the feelings we feel, but have no factual physical basis. Let me explain. So when I got my children taken away, the amount of times I was quick to defend my honor was fucking ridiculous. I was so determined that every remark and every comment that anyone said was somehow against my parenting abilities or against who I was as a person in general. I would hear things people would supposedly say according to my brain, but that weren't even actually said. I also had constant heartburn and stomach problems. So, of course, naturally, you go to the doctor, they prescribe you meds, but I don't remember any of my doctors, including my psychiatrist, actually taking the time to listen to me and what I was going through. Again, if I would have been able to be heard, maybe my internal trauma wouldn't have gone on so long. But also, again, we go back to the whole, or don't put a blame on others for not doing what you didn't verbalize you needed them to do. You cannot blame everybody else for your issues because of their deficiencies. You will go mad. And I am speaking from personal experience because it will literally make you into a crazy person. I can't blame anybody else for not reading my mind. What I can do, though, is say that I know I'm not alone with these thoughts and experiences. And that is why I have the business I have today. I'm not able to help everyone out there. But if I can help even one person realize their pain can be healed and they can still move past these mental blocks and these issues of the blaming and shaming game, then that is a life that went from no purpose to such purpose within themselves and myself and for themselves and myself. That, my friend, fucking epic. Priceless. Okay, but seriously, I get it, right? We're apprehensive to change. And being socially unacceptable, we're so apprehensive, right? We're going to be socially unacceptable. Here we go. But just like the schizophrenic patients, I can speak from my own personal experience that aggression, anger, violence, they become more magnified. My self-destructive behaviors, excuses for those behaviors, the frustration, feeling misunderstood. All of these stemmed from the balled up anger within myself, from the trauma I refused to accept or tried to understand and were shut down again and again. Like an overgrown child who can't process my feelings and emotions, right? I was, although, let me rephrase that. I was and still can be an overgrown child at times who has some issues controlling my emotions. I can fucking say that. That's okay. Say it with me. Okay? I want everybody to just say it with me. I am fucked up. And that's not fucked up. I am socially unacceptable. But I accept within myself what other people fucking can't. I love when I get on one of those rolls, I'm just saying. I get on those rolls and I'm like, oh my God, did I just say that? Did I just create that? You're welcome. You guys can use it. Anyways, if you cannot accept who you are, how can you ever expect someone else to accept you on any level? Be genuine with your fucked up you so you can be open to change. You can be open to knowing that you aren't a bitch for yelling at a man who grabbed your arm. Maybe it was just that you were triggered because somewhere along the way, there was a man in your life who grabbed your arm like that to hold you in place while he beat the shit out of you. This is one of those times that's really hard for me to be open about, okay? When I'm giving you experiences, I'm giving you experiences of things that happened to me. But I don't want to be superficial with you guys. I want to be real. I want to be raw. And I want to be an open book for you so that you can feel safe and comfortable to be open with me. It is fucking hard. Trust me, I know it is hard to be vulnerable, to be open. Obviously, I'm on a fucking podcast just sharing my shit. But it's never going to get easier if you don't let the hard come into your life. What's worse than that pain is the pain of knowing you could have been living a much more fulfilled life years ago if you had just pushed through the pain of being vulnerable with yourself and for yourself. If you don't believe me, believe Elvin Simrod, okay? He was a teacher. I don't know if he still is at MMHC. It was Kolk's teacher. Anyways, he said that most human suffering is related to love and loss. He encourages psychiatrists to help people acknowledge, experience, and bear the reality of life with all its pleasures and heartbreak. Remember how I quoted him earlier? He says that the greatest source of our suffering are the lies we tell in ourselves, and that people can never get better without knowing what they know and feeling what they feel. Kolk says, I remember asking him once, what would you call this patient? Schizophrenic or schizoaffective? I fucking love this. He paused and stroked his chin, apparently in deep thought. I think I'd call him Michael McIntyre. Fucking unreal. You see, the problem is not that we have a past. The problem is the inability or unwillingness to accept ourselves or our feelings because others have labeled us by our trauma, not who we are as individuals. I'm not a trauma survivor. I am motherfucking Angela Spooner who has Phoenix morphine capabilities and loves to feel her emotions and sensations, but also has the ability to reprogram her pain into power and fucking confidence. If you don't believe me, well, let's see. Another thing that Simrad says. He said that healing depends on experiential knowledge. You can be fully in charge of your life only if you can acknowledge the reality of your body in all its visceral dimensions. In other words, right? Because people like to use all these like highfalutin shit. In other words, our skin, heart, lungs, stomach, intestines, and the list goes on. They all correlate to your senses, collecting information from your body along with the reactions associated with those sensations. The more you know the reality and not the delusions you've told yourself, the more in control and in charge you become. Before I get into that though, let's talk about drugs for a second. Now, I'm not talking about the illegal kind of drugs, guys. Calm yourself down. I'm talking about how there was a huge shift in the way doctors approached patients once they saw the benefits of medications. Before we talk about the medications, let's talk about the chemical imbalances and what that fucking even means, right? Side note, I just want you to remember that I love to research and I graduated with my nursing degree, but I'm not a fucking doctor and I'm merely going over my nerd brain memory bank, okay? So let's not sit there and say, Angela said this, so it must be true, right? I don't need any lawsuits. I say, girl, let me holler at you. Let me holler at you for a second. Let me see you. Hey, girl. I'm just kidding, guys. Just kidding. But we interrupt this program to give you a short ad from yours truly, Angela Sputnik. Anyways, guys. So this ad is to let you wonderful moms out there know that my 6-week challenge to prioritize you is coming to a close. I know I've probably said this and that, but I had a feeling that I needed to stay open, which is a good thing because I've been able to help more women. But I'm keeping it open until Sunday evening. That is going to be Mother's Day, I believe. I'm so bad with dates. Anyway, I kept it open because I really, truly believe in helping. I want to help you. I want you to get those results, reclaim your confident you, and understand who you are again. Or maybe for the first time. Let's reduce that anxiety, make you feel sexy, confident in your own skin. That's what I want from you. For you, not from you. I want you to receive those things in yourself, through yourself, and of yourself. Okay? I'm not here to validate you. I'm here to get you to validate you. So send me a message, shoot me a message, let me know, because I'm here, girl. Okay, so we have neurotransmitters, dopamine, glutamate, endorphins, serotonin, and the brain's amygdala. Some of you are probably recognizing those names, and some of you are bored by hearing those names because you're like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Well, let me explain why these guys are so important to remember if you want to have some real changes in your fucking life, okay? So neurotransmitters are the messengers that carry the email, essentially. So they carry the nerve impulses from one location to the next, aka the email from one location to the next. It allows for a steady flow in your body. If there's an issue with the flow, then what do you think happens? If those emails aren't getting to where they need to get, and this is vital information, shit gets chaotic and wild on the cyber world, right? AKA our nervous system. So let's talk about that, right? Dopamine. This is our pleasure enticer. Think of like dopamine, devil dopamine. So this devil dopamine, it gives you feelings of stimulation, pleasure, increased blood flow, and satisfaction. Well, that all sounds all naughty, right? Think of the need to think, sleep, increase memory, focus. Dopamine is good at all of this. You get too much of it, it means your aggression can increase. Also, it's a lot harder for you to control your impulses or the anxiety that you feel. If you don't have enough of it, though, you get that foggy brain feeling and you can have muscle spasms. So why, you may ask, would you have muscle spasms? So if you have these neurotransmitters that are firing, right? But they're firing spasmodically, the rest time, it's not adequate. So basically you have like bing, 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 bing. It's like sending emails and you're like, try to do it too much. And then things get chaotic. And then, your computer starts spasming out and you're like, oh, fuck, here we go. Right. And then we have to shut down the whole computer and start back up again. Right. It's a whole thing. So anyways, moving on. Then you have glutamate. Glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It's important for your brain and its functioning. Too much and your cells just die, but you get too little and you'll decrease your energy. High levels can be seen in people as aggression and headaches. So again, glutamate and dopamine kind of go hand in hand, okay? This makes sense since it's the power to your brain's functioning. It's like a computer getting hot and overloading. So when it gets hot and starts overloading, then it can crash and die, right? So the opposite is true. When it gets low, what do you think would happen? Your fucking memory sucks. We're talking dial up, right? If you can't remember, you definitely can't learn. It'll make you feel exhausted. I know, I've been there, okay? Definitely have some glutamate low levels. So when you're tired, are you really able to concentrate? Fuck no, you can't. So see, there are reasons why we need good levels of glutamate. Next, how about endorphins? So they're good for reducing stress and pain and are sometimes called the happiness hormone. Difference between dopamine and endorphins is that endorphins act quickly and then they leave, right? Whereas dopamine lasts, and there are those wonderful feelings and sensations you get after it. So they last. And then, see, I wrote it down wrong, but endorphins are the ones you get after a badass workout. When you eat things like chocolate, you know what I'm talking about, women. And then you have sex. Let's talk about sex, baby. Just kidding, guys. All right. You know that I love to sing to you. Anyways, if you're curious about low amounts or high amounts, just think of how you feel when you skip working out or you aren't having sex, right? And then you go work out and have sex and you'll see the difference. Just kidding. But really, we already know what happens when we aren't doing those stimulating activities that are good for our well-being, or like when you eat shit food opposed to healthier food. We cringe at substituting broccoli over mac and cheese, but which one leaves you feeling those good feelings? Same could be said for workouts and sex. That's why we're learning our body in this healing process, right? Because we're tired of the excuses and not understanding. Anyway, so next we have the amygdala and serotonin. The amygdala is a cluster of brain cells that determines whether sounds, images, or body sensations are perceived as a threat or not. So these perceptions, they're dependent on the amount of serotonin in that part of the brain. So then what's serotonin, right? Well, it's the backstage boss of the whole computer system we call our fucking body. It's literally the messenger that carries the package from nerve to brain to body and around it goes. It's like the mom system. So what I mean by that is that it's in charge of making sure shit gets done and the message gets to where it needs to go in order for the body to function properly. So low levels of serotonin make us more hyperreactive to stressful stimuli, like loud sounds, while higher levels of serotonin dampen their fear system, making them less likely to become aggressive or frozen in response to potential threats. Okay? So, cortisol is responsible for putting an end to the stress response by sending an all-safe signal to lower the stress response. Okay, so why the hell did I share all of that and make your brains hurt, you may ask? Well, because in some instances, there really is a need for medication management. You can try to fight it and run from it, but there are times that trying to cope yourself through situations just aren't possible because of the chemical structure. Okay? For instance, I was so opposed to medications. I really thought they were the worst thing and led to being completely dependent on them. I was like, fuck no, I want no parts of that shit, Ricky Bobby. I went through half of my nursing schooling before my instructors literally told me I needed to be on meds for my ADHD. I guess me dancing and moving around the whole 8-hour class was unacceptable behavior, you know? Anyway, so for the first time in my life, I got on ADHD meds. Then I went on meds to help me sleep. Mind you, yes, they did help. But taking them alone and thinking I could continue functioning and not dealing with my trauma, that was the real issue. I believe, just like Coke does, that solely taking meds is only a Band-Aid for a much bigger wound that needs debridement and cleaning out and constant maintenance. For those of you that don't know, debridement, literally digging at the infected wound to clean it out so it can finally heal. Okay. So don't worry, I'm not going to quiz you on the dopamine and serotonin and all that, but I do want to reiterate that the more you are aware of what happens with your body and can understand the reason you have the feelings and sensations and inability to control your thoughts and behaviors, the better chance you have of healing and moving past the past. But not only that, also perceiving the past in a new and healed light where your triggers are managed better because you understand them better. The better you can manage your triggers and traumatic bursts, and the easier life will become. And maybe even reducing those meds over time. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I can say that I began learning about myself and who I was and healing my wounds and understanding my triggers so that the less dependent I had become with my meds. I literally would have conversations with my psychiatrist and say, okay, I think I can go out less. I think I can go less. And she would look at me every time like, the fuck? I'm like, just do what I said, ma'am. I'm your boss right now. Anyways. All right. So also, I do want to say, I don't believe I actually have ADHD in and of itself. I believe my trauma held me back from my normal dopamine, glutamate, endorphin, and serotonin levels that are required to function in a more controlled and calm way. I know it sounds super scatterbrained here and there and everywhere, but I have like so much trauma brain sometimes. And then I just want to say everything because I've learned so much that sometimes I sound like those like nerdy geniuses that make no sense. Kind of like Belle from Beauty and the Beast, her dad. You know, he was like smart, but then he sounded like a crazy person. That's me. Or at least that's what I'm calling myself. Anyways, so let's talk about the dogs that Coke mentions that were being tested with electric shocks. I know, it was fucked up. So it's also inhumane. But the dogs who were shocked, they were unable to get out of their cages when the door opened as opposed to the unshocked dogs because they had that fear and their stress hormones, which is cortisol that we talked about earlier, it was unable to bring down their response because their threat was still there for them. So I used to experience the same thing. I was so used to the beatings I experienced or the constant berating or degrading that I would constantly feel the stress. And I would lash out at anyone who even joked about touching me. For instance, I remember when I worked with a cook, right? I was a cook working with a cook. Anyways, he was a guy who kept trying to hit on me. I naturally would threaten to use my kitchen knife on him if he tried to make a move. Now, although working in a kitchen in a restaurant, it can be like a war zone, and sometimes you do have to be a little aggressive because there's a lot of high intensity with people's emotions and how they like are easily triggered, and it's hot back there and all the things. So I can also see the other aspect where I was so triggered because I didn't want a man even near me due to remembering all the beatings I got from my exes for even talking to me and being called a whore and a stupid bitch. Like literally, I get my ass beat because a guy hit on me. I'm like, I don't have any control of that. I'm sorry. I'll try to look uglier. Holy shit. But they'd be like, yeah, you're a whore. You're a stupid bitch. Why? Because hurt people hurt people. I didn't want to experience that again, obviously. So even after I was no longer with any of my abusers, my walls were built like the Great Wall, except just as Kolk said about animals returning to their home, even if their home wasn't safe, I would return again and again to that toxic situation. It was what I knew. Just like the girl he talked about later on in the chapter, he talked about this girl that was raped at gunpoint in a hotel at 16. Then she got involved with a pimp who prostituted her. He would beat her, then she would go to jail, but she'd always go back to the pimp. Her grandparents sent her to a rehab facility where she got the interventional help and began to change her life and worked as a receptionist and started taking courses at college. But she started reading about famous prostitutes and her memory went back to those well-known experiences. And she dumped the guy she was dating, who was a classmate, because she said that he was boring and she would pick out the dumbest reasons to break up with him. And I know because I've been there, right? She was like, I don't like the way his boxers are. Like, what the fuck? Yeah. I say, what the fuck? And then I'm like, yeah, I've done that. I didn't like the way a guy smiled or the way that he laughed or how he picked up his napkin. It's a real struggle. It's because we're trying to find any and every reason to get away from these odd feelings and sensations within us because we're not used to that. So, anyways, she decides to leave this guy. She got with an addict. He would stake her out, stalk her, and beat her. So then she got help again after yet again another beating. So Freud talks about this. He talks about traumatic reenactment, where there was the compulsion to repeat. According to Kolk, however, Freud believed that the reenactments were an unconscious attempt to get control over a painful situation and that they eventually could lead to mastery and resolution. Although there's no evidence for that actually working, right? Because repetition deepens the impression. I know personally, repeating that painful situation over and over led me to a lot of self-hatred and being cruel, dismissive of the feelings of others, dismissive of my own feelings. Again, because hurt people hurt people. The interesting part here is that Kolk and a colleague began studying why this happens, because normally we are attracted to things that motivate us and make us feel safe, right? Make us feel alive. Well, just like I keep telling you that you can build a new thought process so that your thoughts currently don't have to be your thoughts later on in life, so too, it is true that those painful feelings and experiences were ingrained into our mind, making you think that it's normal or acceptable behavior and that it's your fault you got called a slut because a guy checked you out. Or it's your fault someone cheated on you because they gave you the excuse that it was because you didn't make them feel appreciated, instead of just fucking telling you that before cheating on you. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? I hope so. If you are constantly having to prove to yourselves, to others, you will never feel like you're enough unless you have that constant validation, right? I love when Kolk said, In the long run, people become more preoccupied with the pain of withdrawal than the activity itself. This theory could explain why some people hire someone to beat them or burn themselves with cigarettes, or why we get grossed out, we get grossed out by someone crying because we were ashamed of crying ourselves. Over time, this fear and pain can be turned into pleasure. As sick as it sounds, remind yourself that there is hope and no one is ever too far gone unless they're fucking dead, right? If this is true about painful situations, then it's also true about situations where you hate how boring something is, or you hate that there's no thrill in this or that. In later episodes, we will go over the chapters that go over some of the methods that you can utilize on your healing journey. But for today's purposes, let's go over the dominant monkey, right? Kolk talks about this and the association with serotonin, which, remember, we said serotonin is responsible for carrying messages. So the dominant monkey had more serotonin, and he was the high-ranking monkey, whereas the low-ranking monkey, that was the one with the low serotonin. What happened was that when the low-ranking monkey got more serotonin, his functioning increased and he became the more dominant monkey. Whereas the originally dominant monkey's serotonin was decreased, leading to a lower-ranking monkey who became less functioning. So again, you are not the problem. Serotonin levels can be managed with exercise, meditation, managing your stress, massages. So it is possible. And it doesn't always require medications. But it is possible to change. It does require something, though. It requires you to get your fucking butt up, start to fight for you, because you've avoided yourself long enough, right? You avoided that change that scared you so much. So Kolk did a study for patients that took serotonin. By the way, Prozac has serotonin. The result was that people with trauma slept more soundly, were less preoccupied with the past, and had more control over their emotions. Before Prozac, their emotions controlled their reactions. So this is not to say I'm promoting Prozac, just so we're aware. I'm promoting serotonin and the need for it in your life. That being said, do mental health medications work? Yes. But as with all medications, there are always side effects to unnatural resources. So yes, medications can be beneficial and were beneficial for me as well. But true change is becoming regulated even without medication or our unhealthy coping mechanisms by learning your body, not someone else's body, and learning what it needs. Not everything works for everyone, so it may take a trial and error. I took years to find what worked for me. Although I still do have my moments, I never feel like I've never felt more alive and in control of who I am than I do right now. This is the only life that you have, okay? On this earth right now. So are you going to wait another year or 2 or 10 before giving in to change? Or are you going to say, I'm a fucking beast and I want to make my tomorrow promises for myself today's reality as a gift to me? Let me read this final paragraph because it's so fucking good, okay? The brain disease model overlooks 4 fundamental truths. Number 1, our capacity to destroy one another is matched by our capacity to heal one another. Restoring relationships and community is central to restoring well-being. Number 2, language gives us the power to change ourselves and others by communicating our experiences, helping us to define what we know and finding a common sense of meaning. 3, we have the ability to regulate our physiology, including some of these so-called involuntary functions of the body and brain, through such basic activities as breathing, moving, and touching. And 4, we can change social conditions to create environments in which children and adults can feel safe and where they can thrive. Don't fucking forget that. Okay? There is a quiz. I'm just kidding. There's not a quiz. Just remember, you are fucking awesome. You are strong and you can do this. I will see you next week, guys. I look forward to it.